Many of our underwriter leaders have told us, and we've heard it as we've gone out into the market and spoke with our brokers, speed to quote matters. And we need to hurry up because we're not meeting expectations or competitors are beating us.
For those that don't know me, I'm Juan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Cytora. I'm joined by Allison, Yaemish, and Neeren. You want to start with a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having us. Allison Thornicroft. I work at Arch Insurance. I am leading a domain product manager there over our customer and intake space. So that'd be submission intake clearance, producer management, broker management systems, etc. I've worked at Arch for about 15 months, but I've always been in the P&C space. Prior to that, Liberty Mutual, and then Hanover Insurance before that. So good to be here. I live in Austin, Texas. Also.
Hi, everyone. My name's Yaemish Rughoo. I'm currently Program Director at Everen. I've been there for 1 month. Prior to that, I was 20 years at Beazley in various roles. The last role I had was Head of Technology for Beazley Digital. Very happy to be here. Look forward to the discussion.
My name is Neeren Chauhan. I'm with Tokio Marine. I lead innovation and AI for Tokio Marine in the US for one of the companies. And I have spent close to a decade and a half in the industry. Ranging from personal to commercial to specialty lines. So I know a little bit about a lot of things to be dangerous, some of which I'll share and some of which I'm learning already from the conversation. So happy to be here.
Thank you. So then let's start with, we were talking about the introduction was all about GenAI. So let's start with where it is each of your organizations in terms of GenAI adoption to set the scene. And then we'll go into like specific tips of what's worked well and what hasn't. Do you want to start, Neeren, this one?
October of 2022. It seems like a long time, but that's when OpenAI came out with ChatGPT. So it's only been a couple of years. And what has happened in the industry is that number one theme that I'll point out is that there has been a lot of excitement. People are really excited about what's interesting. But the challenge at the same time has been in the last couple of years to figure out how do you discern useful from interesting. So people get excited about different use cases, but then they realize that it might take a lot of investment. You might need to clean up a bunch of data before you start using AI. There are people challenges. So all of that is creating a spectrum on which people are, all the way from having tried a few things to some people jumping in right now. In general, my sense is that over the next 6 months, there will be more and more adoption. The pace will continue to increase. But I feel like there will be some companies who will completely miss the generative AI wave and they will jump onto agentic. There is more excitement about that. And those use cases, as was mentioned in the previous conversation, they're somewhat easier to implement. They're smaller in scope sometimes. Now, they have their own challenges that they come with. But in general, I'm very optimistic about agentic AI. So I'll pause there to see what others have to add.
We're not using any AI tools at the moment, and that's what's attracted me to go there. It really is greenfield, and there's a lot of opportunity there, so I'm very excited about that. At Beazley, though, Cytora were one of the first partners that we engaged with who were using GenAI, and we've been partnering with you now, for about 3-4 years now. We've developed the clearance process, which is now automated, so we can now use Cytora to ingest submission data and clear all submissions that come through. We're now working on triaging. And the next step after that was obviously decision-ready or quote-ready data. Other areas within Beazley where we're using a bit of AI is obviously on the claims side. There's lots of opportunity there. But also what I'm quite interested in is really using it within technology. So I think we always talk about some business use cases, but I also feel like within technology, we need to be adopting some of those AI tools and showing some of our business stakeholders like the benefit of those. So I'm really looking forward to doing that at Everen.
So we've been working with Cytora for about a year at Arch Insurance, and we've had kind of multiple tracks moving forward at the same time. So we are live with clearance intake, data extraction, and document classification. We are also live with several use cases around what we describe as full extraction, so extracting from loss runs or schedules of certain kinds. And then I think most recently, we're going to be going live in our claims space, probably around the triage space. I oversee the underwriting side, not the claims side. So look to Juan for confirmation there.
Yeah, that's true. What are your priorities when you're thinking about using technology? Like, what are you trying to solve for and how is GenAI supporting that?
So many of our underwriter leaders have told us, and we've heard it as we've gone out into the market and spoke with our brokers, speed to quote matters. and we need to hurry up because we're not meeting expectations or competitors are beating us. What we know from looking at our data and analytics at Arch is if we're first to quote across multiple markets, we have a 50% higher rate of binding that business. So time matters. And quite frankly, the clearance or the intake step of the process is low value in terms of what the broker or the underwriter needs to get something out to the market. So we are, looking to reduce what used to be clearance in days to clearance in hours. And Cytora is a key part of how we're driving towards that outcome.
We're very similar. Well, Beasley were very similar, I should say. We spent a couple of years really investing in distributing our product via APIs, and that is like speed, right? But that's what brokers want: price, speed. But what we've realized and what we've seen now over those same 2 years is our email submissions haven't shrunk. They've kind of plateaued. So we've almost doubled our submission intake via APIs and emails. So what we're trying to do is similar to what you're doing, Allison, which is we need to process those email submissions as quickly as possible, get them through clearance, triage them, and get them into a position. I think ultimately we want to auto quote. That's ultimately where we want to get to, but definitely want to just put it in front of an underwriter so that they can just review certain exceptions and just go, right, click a button, that's going out the door within a couple of hours. I think our clearance process, just can keep me honest here, probably about 4 hours at the moment on clearance. So we're quite good on that point, but I think for triage and for decision-ready submissions, I think that's where we want to get to.
Overall, my observation has been in the last 18 months or so, insurers, especially carriers, are more focused on the use cases that lead to productivity gains. So doing things faster, cheaper, that's been the focus. The biggest excitement for me personally, when you think about AI and technology in insurance, is that you get the most accurate price for the risk in real time. Like there is a lot of static models that look back and evaluate the risk. So there is a ton of opportunity there, but I don't see a lot of work happening in those domains just yet. And part of the reason is no one wants to be the number one in taking some of that risk. So I see a lot of opportunities in document ingestion, document processing, underwriter and claim support, ton of opportunities in legal, ton of opportunities in actuarial analysis. We don't do a lot of it in our world today, but I was at Allstate. Call centers are probably going to go out of business at some point. So there is a ton of opportunity in some of those domains, but still some gap in the core of the insurance business. Now, we're starting to use Cytora for some of those productivity-related things as well. But my hope is that we continue to move towards where the technology can really benefit the insured ultimately. And there is more work to be done there.
Yeah, just to describe what does the architecture and the workflow look like for those kind of, you're less familiar with the claim side of things, but at least on the underwriting side, what does the workflow look like and the different systems involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to walk through that. And I'm pretty sure claims is copying what we built on the underwriting side. So pretty similar. So essentially, most of our submissions today are still email based. We haven't leaned too hard into like portals and such. So vast majority of our flow is coming in that way. We're seeing north of 250,000 submissions a year. And by year end, we will have over 90% of that volume flowing through a system that includes the Cytora product. So essentially what we do is we set up through our email box, we assign on the back end basically an identifier unit that we can then transmit the submission email and the ID to Cytora. They then send back their extraction schema to us as well as our document classification tags. From there, we start to kick off some parallel processes. So if needed, we're going to human in the loop, HITL. Although recently I'll share, when we first went live with some of these models, we turned what I refer to as the governor on for 100% of submissions, regardless of how confident the Cytora model was. We've now lifted that. We're seeing 70% time savings associated with that of effort. And we're seeing confidence or precision levels of like 95 and 97%. So really impressive stuff. So yeah, we would go human in the loop. Then we would complete our conflict checks that we do at part of intake. We also will be parallel auto filing into our document repository, all the documents based on what the classification type was. And then we've also got a third piece kicking off where we'd have an orchestrator basically listening for the emitting of that first two workflow events and then saying, oh, okay, here we've got a loss run. I want to go extract the loss run and then serve that up in a workbench underwriter ready UI. So That's how we're building things.
Great. The workbench, this is a in-house built one or is it a commercial one?
It's built on a commercial platform.
I was going to say that's pretty much the set process that we built at Beasley, apart from the loss runs. I just wanted to add a little bit more, like just to kind of help frame the problem, right? So at Beasley, I think we receive our own application form only 13% of the time. So that means we're receiving competitor application forms all the other time. So training the model for our competitors' application form, making sure that we can make adjustments, train the model, that's where the real value is. You know, you'd expect training it on your own application form. Sure, you can do that all day long because you know what the data is. But doing it on the competitor's application form, I think that's where the true value comes from.
Did you want to explain what, because when people hear training, that immediately people think it's about training templates or training forms. It's like almost like the old way of doing this. What does training as like a Cytora platform, for example, in a cyber context look like?
The cyber intake form now is changed completely, has revolutionized over the last couple of years. The amount of data that we ask for on the cyber form is incredible. So for us, when you are looking at data from an application form and understanding what that value is, so we look at accuracy and completeness of data when we're looking at an application form. So we're looking at those two scores. So when we get new application forms or versions changed, it's being able to tell the model, well, this is now where you need to go and look for that data source. And then the model will then pick that up and then retrain itself. And that's where you get the time saving.
Yeah, I think this is quite a specific challenge to cyber, which is it's not about like what data you get from each application form. Is like the risk controls differ by application form. So the typical one is like, does the client use multi-factor authentication for remote access, right? But there would be another application form that just asks a slightly different question, and it does require underwriting judgment to decide, are you happy to take this version of the question as the answer to the schema point you want? So it's not about training templates, it's more about training the interpretation of the questions, it's a very interesting challenge, which is very specific to cyber because it's still quite an emerging line of business. Neeren, you're earlier in the process, but is there any thoughts on how you're thinking about
No, nothing to add there. I think they covered it. The one thing that I'd say, which kind of connects to my previous point, I'm really excited about the third-party data sources that you connect with as well. Initially, we won't be using that, but again, I think that's where a lot of impact is also going to come from, to give me the risk insights and help me accurately assess the risk and price it, in addition to automating everything else. And the other thing I'd say is what I find fascinating is that a lot of this change is happening because sometimes the push is coming from the brokers and agents who are sometimes ahead in their own adoption of AI and automation tools. And that's, I think, a good thing for carriers too, because carriers tend to sometimes get lost in their own internal debates and move much slower than they should. But I think this whole broker piece. So underwriting, I think, is a very interesting domain that will continue to evolve. And my hope is claims will catch up to that as well.
Lessons learned from the work you've done so far. What would you have done differently? Did it deliver on your expectations?
There's no silver bullet. Everyone that I talk to in the C-suite is debating endlessly to figure out that one solution that will change the world. We should not wait for that. So my biggest learning is incrementally start moving forward. Take the first step and then you'll figure out the next.
Well, I'm a big believer in the whole value realization framework, having a strategy, having objectives, having key results, like making sure that you've got a team set up for that kind of framework is super important for a couple of things, right? One, you empower that delivery team to come up with those key results. Those key results are small wins that you can start to measure and learn from and experience rather than waiting for the whole thing to be built. I think the second thing is when you build GenAI, when you build these kind of tools, I think what it does is put focus on other areas. And I think what we noticed at Beasley Digital was then we started to ask questions. Okay, we can get these submissions via APIs. We can start to automate the clearance process. But is our clearance engine right? Do we need to fine tune that now because we seem to be getting a lot of referrals through clearance, for example? Or do we need to actually look at the product itself, which is a big question that we always have with the underwriters, which is, well, is the product actually geared for this end of the market, which is the SME market? So I think a couple of takeaways for me, if we're going to do things again, is we need to look at everything, not just the submission intake process, but look at all of the other functions around it as well.
And it's quite interesting on the value realization framework. Both Arch and Beasley are two great examples of. I'm less familiar with how do you work internally in Tokyo, but Arch and Beasley, you've got like very clear OKRs, which actually it's not just in a piece of paper. It's like you live and breathe them. And every time you have a conversation, you bring up the OKRs. Every initiative is aligned with your objective. It's a very cool. Allison?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been on our journey with Cytora for just under a year from contract signing. I think from when we finished contract and kind of picked up the work to having our first release into the intake space, we did it in 3 months. We followed up in 2025 with several releases since then. Overall, it's been a fantastic experience. We are not going for 70, 80% accuracy. We are going for 95 to 97%. And we only put high quality, reliable results in production because we don't want to deal with, should I trust this data? That is not something we want anyone, particularly the underwriter, wondering about. Working with Cytora has been fantastic. If you didn't remind me, Juan, some of your employees feel like mine. So, I mean, it's really been very collaborative in that sense. In terms of anything we would have done differently, when I thought about this question, I said maybe we would have had our future state business process workflows more refined and planned out. But at the same time, the collaboration with the Cytora team really helping us understand the power of the product informed a lot of that design as well. So unfortunately, Cytora has had to sit through some of our internal sausage making, but they've been good sports about it. It's been a fantastic experience, and we're excited to expand the use cases with you in the future.
Sounds like we have to wrap up. Thank you so much, the three of you. Pleasure.
See you.